For those of you who have just joined us after closed session, welcome to this hybrid regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. I am Lisa Pelosi, Board President, and I would like to introduce my fellow trustees, Laura Simon, Sean Mora, Jeannie Kerr. I would also like to introduce our district staff, Superintendent Ruben Aurelio, Assistant Superintendent Mr. Christopher Heller, Chief Business Official Dr. Kay Vang, Director of Educational Services Miss Veronica Miranda, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Governing Board, Miss Erica Magical, and our Director of IT in the back, Mr. Derek Machado. Additional site administrators are also joining us this evening. We have RLS Middle School Principal, Mr. Andrew Ryan, St. Helena Elementary School Principal, Dr. Carmen Emery, and St. Helena Primary School Principal, Mrs. Rebecca Rocha. We are delighted that you are viewing in person on Zoom or television channel 27 or on our YouTube channel. A copy of this board meeting video will also be available on our website at www.sthelinaunified.org. Also, I would just like to let everybody know Trustee Simon needs to leave us by 7:15 this evening, so we may just take a break at that point to allow her to leave. So, absolutely. In connection with item 4A and 4B, the board received information and provided staff with direction. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the flag salute, please. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item 6A is public comment at open session items. At this point, if there's anybody who would like to come forward and please feel free to do so. You're welcome to give your name and address, but you can remain anonymous if you'd like to as well. And there is a 3-minute limit, please. Thank you.
So this is for a non-agenda board item.
Great, perfect, thank you.
My name is Kathy Adams, and I'm the founding head of school for a small charter school in Napa called Mayacamas Charter Middle School. I'm here today representing our board, teachers, staff, and all of our families. I understand some of you are aware of our protracted history, including the filing of a countywide benefit charter petition this past August, which after much contemplation we pulled in November. I'm here today for 2 reasons. First, with respect to the initial countywide charter, we'd like to apologize for our failure to reach out to the board prior to filing. We certainly made a number of missteps in our first attempt at establishing a countywide charter, and we regret that we didn't have the foresight at the time to do the necessary groundwork with more of our communities before we filed. The founders and our parents are like many of you, just parents who have been thrust into the educational landscape in our great county because we care about our families and what is best for all students. In our rush to try and protect our current families, we made a few mistakes, which ultimately resulted in some heavy contemplation and many apologies. We ask that you forgive this rookie mistake as we try to do a better job next time. This leads me to the second reason I am here. Despite our initial failure, we have never strayed from our desire to bring Mayacamas countywide charter to life and to serve students and families throughout the county who need an alternative path. We feel our unique combination of curricular elements is much needed by some students who aren't thriving in the more traditional environment. Our plan is to use the NTN project-based learning model as our platform to deliver a non-traditional education that is highly focused on individual students. We embrace innovation using a combination of curricula and tools on a subject-by-subject basis, utilizing 90-minute block scheduling, learning lab for specialized learning 4 times a week, and individualized learning plans for each student. We believe our goals align with yours to provide the best education possible to all of our Napa County students. And by collaborating, we can use innovation to test different types of instruction and to think outside the box, creating different environments so that all students have the best chance to thrive in our public schools. We are hopeful that we can coexist and in fact work together to make real advances to public education in our valley so that all students get what they need. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out, and we are excited about the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here, Kathy. I appreciate that. Is there any other public comment on items not on the agenda this evening? No? Okay, nothing. All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to business operations in 7A, which is the public hearing and review of Resolution 23-15 regarding accounting of developer fees for the 2022-23 school year. Dr. Vang, please.
Thank you, President Pelosi. So this is our annual accounting of developer fees for the prior school year, which would be 2022-23. This agenda item, I've included the financial report for developer fees, which sit in Fund 25. There's also a resolution. Developer fees are used to maintain and provide updated classrooms and facilities. We can also use these fees for capital projects. Again, this is an annual agenda item that we bring to the board every year. And in January, we will also have a developer fee study that I'll be bringing back to the board.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this agenda item, or is that after within? Okay, thank you. So at this point, we are going to hold a public hearing. The public hearing for the accounting of the developer fees for 2022-23 fiscal year is now open at 6:06 p.m. And we will keep that comment period open for at least 1 minute. Comments during this public hearing should be limited to the accounting of development fees for the 2022-23 fiscal year. It is our goal to hear from all who wish to be heard. If anybody would like to come to the podium, please do so. It's always a very long. Okay, thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. The governing board has not had any comments or heard any concerns, so we will now close the public hearing at 6:08 p.m. Am I correct? Oh, yes, oh, sorry. Do I need to repeat all that? Okay, all right. Trustees, do you have any questions about the accounting of the development fees for 2022-23? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, 7B is review and consider approval of the 2023-24 first interim report. Dr. Vang, please.
Oh, excuse me, President Pelosi. Did you want to announce that we amended the agenda item?
Oh, okay.
The
Was
addenda.
I supposed to do that again?
So that we know where it's at.
Okay,
So that if
so
there's any viewers-
just for those watching at home and those present, after we do 7C, we are moving items 10, the item 10 up, all three items under 10 up after number 7. Okay, thank you. All right. Dr. Vang, now you're on.
Thank you. All right, so this is our school year 2023-24. This is our first interim. This is the let's see. It's not happening now. Okay. All right, so the first interim provides an opportunity for all of us to formally review the district's budget, including revenues and expenditure projections for not only this fiscal year, but also the 2 subsequent years. And the budget information here reflects the approved state budget along with projected estimates for the local control funding formula. Please keep in mind that the first interim budget is a best estimate of information that's provided right now, facts that are known right now. It is a moving target, and things can change. In fact, they're always changing. So the first interim is includes information that is known right now, provided to us by the state. Key assumptions. Oops. Okay, maybe this is not working very well for me. I'm not doing a very good job with this. Okay. All right, so key assumptions for the first interim include not only this year, but the 2 subsequent years. We have property taxes, including a percent increase here as well. And for the out years, the key assumptions include 2% because we do want to be conservative. Enrollment at 1103 with an average daily attendance of 1045. Unduplicated pupils, 449. Supplemental grant portion, money that we are supposed to use for unduplicated pupils at a little over $1 million. California lottery, both unrestricted and restricted dollars per ADA amounts are listed there, along with mandate block grant, and those funds vary depending on the grade level, and it is by ADA. We also have cost of living, and cost of living here is, these are percentages provided by the state, so I just take them straight off the School Services of California dartboard. Moving on to assumptions, next page. We also have negotiated salary increases. We've settled for this year, and we are at 4.4%. As we know the out years, when we get to the out years, that will be included, but right now I've left it because we have not negotiated for the out years. You see that 0 step and column increases for both certificate and classified are approximately 2%. STRS rates for teacher retirements projected to remain steady at 19, a little over 19%. However, you'll notice that with classified for PERS retirement rates, you can see that there is a slight increase from year to year. Medical benefits are projected to increase about 10% from year to year. Consumer Price Index, again, this comes straight from the School Services of California dartboard, and you can see a slight decrease in the next 2 years. Moving on to the next slide, looking at budget adoption versus first interim. So we're looking at revenue projections. We're comparing budget adoption, projected revenues compared to the first interim, and you can see a slight percentage increase there, and that's due to the fact that at budget adoption, obviously we didn't know what our annual property taxes were, and now we do have that information, and we also have our P1 property taxes, so that is information that's current that we factor into the first interim, so you see a slight increase there, and that impacts the out years. So you see a slight increase in the out years as well. And the LCFF revenue for this particular slide, it is for, it includes state aid, EPA, and excess property taxes. Moving on to the next slide. Again, comparing the budget adoption compared to first interim, we're going to look at federal revenue. You can see that for federal revenue, there is also an increase between what was projected at budget adoption compared to first interim. There's an increase due to the fact that there are the SPED entitlements are projected to be slightly higher. Also, we had, for example, one-time ESSER dollars that were not fully spent last year, so those funds can be spent this year, and they've been budgeted to be fully spent for this school year. And that has, and then for the out years, you'll notice that there is a decrease because of the fact that we have these one-time dollars that are projected to be spent by the end of this fiscal year. Looking at our state revenue for the current year compared to budget adoption, there you can see there's not a huge difference there. But state revenues are slightly lower, not a huge difference. Moving on to projected expenditures. Next slide. So we're looking at our general fund, and this slide is for unrestricted funds. Looking at our salaries and benefits, you can see that in the current year, we have a projection that shows a little over 28 million, and then it increases in the subsequent years. When you're looking at salaries and benefits, looking at total expenditures on the second column, and then looking at the ratio, you'll notice that the ratio for both the current and subsequent years are about 83, 84, 85, 83, 84, and then it goes up to 85. These ratios are within the state of California ratios, because salaries and benefits in general, you'll see that they account for approximately about 85% of any district's expenses. I wanted to, on the next slide, share our general fund contributions to two very specific programs, two restricted programs, one being routine maintenance and the other being special ed. Routine maintenance, the state requires that we contribute a minimum of 3% of total expenditures into keeping up with our maintenance, our projects, and we are meeting that minimum 3% every year. When we take a closer look at special ed, you can see that there is a projected increase in our contribution from general fund into special ed. Please note that this is not unique to St. Helena Unified. In every district in the state of California, special ed is a program where, you know, we are making contributions year after year, and that contribution is increasing. And even with our special ed funding, it's not enough to cover our expenses. So every year there's a contribution, and that contribution is projected to go up from year to year. Looking at the big picture on the next slide, our multi-year projection. So we're looking at our general fund, looking at both unrestricted and restricted funds combined together for the current year and the two subsequent years. You can see our revenue compared to our expenses. And for this year, we're projected to have a net increase in our fund balance, whereas the two out years have a net decrease due to the fact that we're projected to spend more than what we are receiving in revenues. The third year, 2025-26, there's a projected $2.2 million deficit spending. And you can see that if you look at this year compared to the out years, you'll see that our fund balance is decreasing due to the projected deficit spending. Projected reserves are still over 20%. The state requires a minimum of 3% for a school district of our size, so that minimum reserve requirement is based on the size of your district, your school, and so we are our 3% is approximately a little over 1.4, and we are meeting our minimum require reserve. However, we also know that as a basic aid district, we need to maintain a much higher reserve to ensure not only cash flow, but that we are fiscally solvent and we can make our day-to-day and month-to-month payments. Looking at the next slide, cash flow. So cash flow projections, when we look at our monthly cash balances for this school year, we start off with a little over 17 million, and we're projected to end the school year with a balance of a little over 14 million. Cash is king. Cash is not budget. This is what's sitting in the bank. This is money. So we every month we're showing positive cash balances, and that's what we want to see, especially again as a community funded district. The cash flow is critical for us, and we are showing positive cash flow every month for this school year. So then that takes me to my very last slide, which are next steps. And next steps include submitting this hopefully soon to be board approved interim report that will go to our county office, who will then submit it to the California Department of Education. And then in January, we will have an update on we will have an update from the governor in terms of our proposed state budget, and that will be followed by a board review of the second interim in March. So I will prepare that follow-up report. February, March, I will present it at the March board meeting. So the second interim will have a better, more accurate picture of where we are financially. First interim is our first snapshot, it's our first look at where we are with revenues and expenditures. So based on my report, it is my recommendation, it is the district's recommendation that the board approves the first interim report. Are there questions?
Thank you, Dr. Rang. Is there anyone participating via Zoom or present who wishes to publicly comment on this agenda item? Trustees, any questions about this agenda item?
I have a question about meeting the minimum required reserve. So we currently have it at 3%. Did you have does the district have a recommendation for a different minimum required reserve percentage that would be better for us?
This 3% is what the state requires based on our ADA, and because we're smaller, this is the minimum that the state is requiring. However, our board does have that first goal of that 10% of general fund expenditures, and then we have a secondary goal of 33%.
Oh, that's right.
Yes,
Yeah.
of excess property taxes. So the state might have a minimum of 3%, but as a district, our board also has the 10 and the 33%, which is needed again because we are a basic aid district. It's important that our reserve is much higher than what the state is requiring.
Thank you.
Trustee Kerr? Okay.
So with that said, so thank you very much with that. So I do see that our reserve is projected to decrease the next couple of years, and that's due to that $2 million too. It's concerning to me to see that in the red that way, especially since, as we know, we have a lot of facilities coming up. So I think that that's just something that's a topic that we need to really concentrate is our financials in during this next year or two, because it's having a low reserve like that is not okay. I mean, and certainly not having it in the red is pretty as concerning as well. But on the upside, I do want to say thank you for including the other document that you did, the final board packet. It was really interesting to me because it was really kind of a deeper dive into everything, and so thank you for attaching that. I really enjoyed reading that. I did. It's very.
It is.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting information in that part. So thank you very much. Thank you.
I would echo your comments on the reserve as well, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions or?
No, I was just, so I just wanted to double check. So you did say in the 2024, 2025, you took out any raises above step and column. So the reserves are going down without that, right? Okay. So I guess, yes, then
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Right, because there's other factors that really aren't in the first interim
Right, right.
that will come back in March that we'll see, and to be prepared because that number, that red number may look a little different.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any other further questions? Okay. Excuse me. Is there a motion to approve the 2023-24 first interim report as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Madrigal will conduct a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Mora?
Aye.
Trustee Simon?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, item 7C is contracts over 25,000. Dr. Vang again, please.
Thank you. So with this contract, we are asking the board to approve a purchase of 22 new Promethean boards to replace older versions that are currently at our middle school. It is my understanding that RLS was the first school to receive these Promethean boards, and since then, these boards are needed to be in need of a replacement. And if there are additional technical questions, I believe our IT director is in the house, and he can answer those questions as well. We also have our principal who's here, and we need those Promethean boards.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Trustees, any questions about this agenda item?
I have just a quick one. Just kind of the timing of them. So we're ordering, get them. Is it a summer install? Is that what the? And I apologize. I know we've discussed this before, and I slipped in my mind.
Yeah, I usually like to do any type of upgrade that we have to do for summer. I like to do it around December, January, so we can make sure we get the equipment, store it, and then prepare it for a summer install, whether we have somebody coming in and installing it for us, or we're doing it in-house. That way we can get time on the books. If we need to coordinate with maintenance, we can. That way we can get it all done, before, like April, February, or whatever. Could be kind of late. So we want to make sure we get it done before then.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Before you leave, how long do these generally last?
These ones? So within the document that I'm building for the district, they can last up to 10 years in some districts. These ones have lasted about 6 to 7. The newer versions are easier to manage on the back end. They let us do firmware updates to keep their usable life a little bit longer. They were the first ones that we got for the district and were kind of our test bed to see if we wanted the other sites to get them, which we have done, apart from the high school. But these ones definitely need to be replaced as they're starting to show their age, and we're switching from a wall-mounted solution to a cart-mounted solution, which the teachers prefer, and it'll give them some, mobility as to where they want their front of the classroom to be as well. But these ones have gone about 7 years. Ideally, it's between 5 to 10 years, and written in that document is a determination of whether, we need to replace them. So we may not have another one of these coming when, say, the primary is up for refresh. We may say, no, they're okay. We don't need to do that this year. We can wait another year or reassess in 2 years. So.
And it's a 22 is every classroom?
Every
Instructional
classroom.
classroom?
Every
Okay.
instructional classroom.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And anybody else? Questions? Okay, then with that, is there a motion to approve the contracts over $25,000 as presented?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Madrigal will conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Mora?
Aye.
Trustee Simon?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye, motion carried. Okay, we're going to move down now to item 10A, presentation of the 2023-24 RLS Site Strategic Plan. Mr. Andrew Ryan, please. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Just so I know, Erica, are you changing slides? All right, great. Thank you. So saddle up. I need about an hour here. No, I'm just kidding. We'll be good. first of all, I just want to start by saying it's my first opportunity to really address the board and cabinet in this capacity. It is not lost on me how fortunate I am to come to work at RLS every day for St. Helena. It has been an absolute wonderful 5 to 6 months so far. And I'm excited to tell you about our single plan here and answer any questions you have. But it's been a long time, if ever, that I can say I honestly get up and I'm excited and I'm smiled and happy to come to work. And this is a real special place. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. With that in mind, I did have the opportunity to do kind of the long onboard. I was, had the opportunity hired about late March or April, I believe. And with that, I had the, with the board, with cabinet support, I got to come on board and just do a lot of listening. I got to meet with some of you. I got to meet with parents, students, staff, retired staff. And I did a lot of asking questions and getting kind of a feel of what's going on at RLS. And two things really emerged, and I bring this up because I believe you'll see this in our conversations when you come and visit me at RLS and visit us, but also through the single plan. Two things really emerged, and those have been the priorities with the blessing of cabinet. There was some urgency and some work around discipline. And that's a big word and means a lot of things, but we'll leave it at that for now. And culture and climate, and that's with students, that's with staff, that's with the community. And so those have really been, I say that knowing full well the business of what we do is achievement, and so that is always a priority. And despite our scores our district scores being great, there's always room for improvement. We'll talk about that too. But discipline, culture, and climate have really been kind of the marching orders and what you'll see on a day-to-day, week-to-week and basis, and hopefully throughout this. So I'll lead off with our process. It's an interesting thing to inherit a single plan for student achievement. You kind of have to start to think like the person that wrote it before you. And so I had to, we inherited assumptions, we inherited resource allocations and money and decisions and action plans. So what I learned was that it wasn't right, wrong, or indifferent. It wasn't a super inclusive process beforehand. So August, September was spent privying myself to the existing SIPSA while also bringing on board our staff, our parent group, our school site council, revitalizing school site council, revitalizing ELAC. And we got to a place where we had a good understanding of where we're at. So now we can know a little bit more about where we want to go. That was done through a series of meetings early in the year. And activities such as our staff doing red light, yellow light, green light on what actions we've done, what haven't we started. And it was really revealing because quite honestly, they hadn't, despite being incredible professionals, they hadn't been invited into that process yet. So that was very revealing. With that, I wanted to set that context. So with that, we'll go into goal number 1, which is our student achievement goal. There are some very great scores, and it's really a thing to celebrate when we look at like schools, when we look at regional, and there's room for improvement, and there is an achievement gap. So our goal was to close the achievement gap. So the metric for that is a 5% cohort growth for current 6th, 7th, and 8th grade when compared to the previous year. So our goal there is, in thinking about that special study session or board meeting a month or so ago that really outlined looking at data over time and cohort students going through, we took that to heart. And so our academic goal for the Smarter Balance assessment is written in such a way that it's 5% growth in ELA and math for our 6th graders when compared to their 5th grade scores, and their 7th when compared to 6th, and their 8th when compared to 7th. And some actions that I'll highlight, though there's many. You've heard a lot about the professional learning community approach. I'm very proud of the work that RLS has been doing and that I've been able to inherit and do and work with them on. Our master schedule is a thing of beauty as it aligns grade levels to have common MTSS collaboration time, and it allows departments to have that common PLC time. And later in this presentation, I did link a document that I encourage you to look at. That's just some of the work that's being done, deconstructing standards and building extension intervention lessons. And then I also wanted to underscore AVID. We are I believe it's an emerging school-wide AVID school. So we are the second tier below the top recognition for AVID. And what that means is a continuous commitment to sending teachers to the AVID training. By the end of this summer, we will be 100% core content teachers trained with both of our special education teachers and many of our electives, and our counselor and our campus supervisor will have gone to the AVID training. And that AVID is, the elevator speech is, approaches in the classroom to assist students with organization, to assist teachers with lesson design, for inquiry and collaborative approaches to a lesson. Next slide, please. All right, I'm trying to move this along. Goal number 2, I want to call out particularly here, this is one of the 2 goals that I carried over. We decided to carry this over. It's a little bit, there are 2 goals in this LCAP that we inherited, and it sounds like the right work to do, but not knowing the previous authors why, it's a little bit sometimes challenging to figure out where they wanted it to go. So this is where we're taking it. This was written in, it seemed as though the spirit of looking at increasing staff and student awareness of implicit and explicit bias when looking at learning loss as it relates to school suspensions and discipline ramifications. So our baseline was to lower the suspension overall, as we do have, looking at last year's data, the white student subgroups are suspended at a higher clip than our Latinx and our English learner populations by a little bit, as well as the state average. And of course, we're not looking to bring up one subgroup to bring down, we're looking at the impact that learning loss has on suspensions. And a later slide is going to go into how many suspensions we had last year. And as you've probably read, suspensions are obviously necessary. It's a part of ed code, but it's also one of the most negative impacts on a student's learning and progress. So our metric is to lower suspension rates by 20%, which is mentioned at another goal a little bit later on. I wanted to highlight just a few of the actions that we have some resources going to. As you may know, RLS adopted responsibility-centered discipline a number of years ago, and that's a fantastic discipline approach. They are 100% trained. There are 2 people that are not. That's myself and Ms. Hernandez, the counselor. And Mr. Samuels has been trained and is willing to do it again. So we are actually attending the training and have allocated some resources so that we are 100% trained. We will be attending the virtual training. Actually, I'm doing it over the break, and they will be doing it over the next year. So we will have a staff that is fully trained in responsibility-centered discipline. And then I also am an International Institute of Restorative Practices trained professional, which really just means I can lead restorative conversations, as can several people, including Mr. Samuels, including Ms. Hernandez, on the campus. So the idea there is that, the harmed plus the harm doer can equal learning. And, if everything's a hammer, if all I have is a hammer, then everything's a nail. So there needs to be some education that goes along with a consequence, and that's where these come in. So next slide, please, Erica. Okay. Our next goal has received, actually all of our principals have discussed this, and it's been discussed at the board meeting. Our next goal is around communication and a sense of belonging. Increase engagement and/or the sense of engagement through communication strategies, events, meetings, and staff accessibility. So we've spoken before about that California Healthy Kids Survey, where at least RLS students, we spoke about it as a district, but RLS students, 66% reported feeling connected to the school, and 81% reported having an understanding or a sentiment that staff have high expectations of them. Those are great scores. I just want to pause and say, not many schools can get those scores, and yet that tells us that there's 44%, at least that day, that didn't feel connected, or 19 that don't know about the high expectations. I also wanted to bring up, going back to the beginning, that qualitatively, anecdotally, I had a lot of folks share with me during that long onboard about just some improved and increased communication and engagement with the parent community. And I'm going to go into some of that data in a little bit, but part of this goal was also aimed at me working to re-engage with our parent community and invite them on board. So the goal, the metric, is a 5% increase in connectedness and students' high expectations or perception of the staff of them, and an increase in parent satisfaction and connection through a survey that was administered a couple weeks ago, and then I will do so again. So I had to lay a baseline for that. I didn't have anything for that. So now we have a metric that survey will go out at least one more time at the end of the year. And that, just to be clear, is a survey about my communication with not the schools, not the districts, but about me and improving engagement and communication with parents. So some of the actions, I mentioned the Parent Square. I think I do my best to get you all our newsletters weekly. Well, 2 of you certainly hope you get them, but then the rest of you, I try to get those to you as well. We've reinvigorated that school site council in ELAC. We did purchase Can Jam and Cornhole for, which, sounds incredibly professional at the dais, but there was a sentiment that some of our students love to be in competitive sports at lunch, and some like to sit around. But through interviewing some students, like, it's kind of boring. Like, what else can we do here? So we went out and found some fun leisure activities, and actually Miss Vicky and Mr. Pauls are going to do some of these in a PE unit, spend a little time in a PE unit, so that way students have an understanding of how to use the equipment, and we'll open up areas on campus. And then I administered that survey that I mentioned. Okay, goal 4. So this was the other goal that I mentioned that we decided to carry forward. It's the right work, and it says wonderful things. I don't exactly know what the intention was when it was written a year or 2 or 3 years ago, but we're gonna work our way through it this year and then evaluate for next year. This was to build an inclusive systems that support the whole child and community, and this really got at the idea of. Again, on that California Healthy Kids survey, a 28% report in chronic sadness. That was a 6% increase over the previous year. 28 incidents of suspension last year. So our goal there is a 20% reduction in suspension and a 5% reduction in chronic sadness. And I have some new data that I want to share with you as we go about this, around that, which is kind of exciting. Again, the actions worth pointing out there are the discipline approaches we're taking. We are convening our MTSS committee, and not so much committee, our MTSS team weekly. And that said, we're evaluating my colleagues back here and their approach. The K-5 approach really has some benefits, and it seems to be able to support teachers with students in class and maybe get in front of students sooner that need it. And so while we're doing the MTSS work now, we're also simultaneously reflecting on that process and attempting to launch something that resembles K-5 a little bit more next year, K-5 in structure and attendees. Okay, so last goal, which would be our English learner goal. We had about 34, the goal is stated as bridge achievement gap for English language learner students, emerging English learners. Did I get that right? Because I know the language is changing a little bit. Emerging bilingual, thank you. Baseline was 34% of emerging bilingual students gained at least 1 level on the LPAC. Our metric would be to increase by 5% the amount of long-term English learners who move at least 1 or more level on the LPAC, which will open in February and run through May. So by the time students come to us, they are often long-term English learners, 6 or more years, and kind of have hit a plateau. Sometimes this is also when there might be an IEP involved or an SST. But our goal would be to move at least 5% of them on the LPAC. Those long-term English learners at least 1 level. And I think it's great to be able to point out some of the actions here. We have a fully credentialed English teacher who's providing very small group instruction to our ELD students. That same individual is pushing into grade level English classes and co-teaching. She's presenting ELD strategies at our staff meetings. So at any rate, those are some of the actions we're taking there. And I'm moving along there. That was quicker than I timed this a few times. It was a lot longer than this. So if we could go, I want to go to this slide. And this is, if I had to distill this presentation down to 1 slide, this would be it. It's just kind of a snapshot of some data and kind of where we are at this moment in these goals. So I won't read all of these to you, but I do want to point out just a couple. On that first one for academic growth, I want to underscore that PLC time that is provided within the schedule, and that word work is linked, and that was the link I was talking about. If you can't access that, I'm happy to send it to you through Mr. Aurelio or Erica here. And then access. The access period is the rubber hitting the road of the PLC process. That's where students are placed based on performance on a common formative assessment, or they're receiving enrichment or study hall. And then I thought I'd also mention that we do have the after-school study hall, and that is something we will continue to look at. About 30 total students have accessed the study hall portion of that, and about 20 overall students have accessed the ELA and math focus. Moving to goal 2, that says 25, but there are actually 28 total suspensions last year. As of right now, we are at 8 total suspensions. So do me a favor and knock on a little wood, but we are on our way to meeting that goal. And worth mentioning that the district discipline subcommittee has convened twice. Members of RLS staff, including myself, are on there. Actually, some of you are on there. And we look forward to continuing the conversation around calibration and how we handle discipline issues K-12, what practices are we using, as well as calibrating how we document these things in ARIES, which is kind of an important behind the scenes piece. I'm going to move us over to goal 3. This was the survey I provided, increasing some communication. 85% of families responding to the survey I sent out state improved communication. 93 indicate that they're more likely to get involved this year in one of the, that was coffee with the principal or school site council. And 60 feel connected to their child's RLS journey, which of course leaves some room for growth. But I will say I have a middle schooler, and I have a high schooler, and a 5th grader. I am about 60% involved by design of their own. So there's probably 2 ways to flip that, to slice that, but it's still room for growth. We have nearly a 100% delivered rate on Parent Square and a 70% read rate. And so, I actually think that 70% is a little bit higher, given that it goes to, if it's anything like my family, it goes to both of us and my wife reads it. So moving to the second to last component here, the idea of supporting the whole child. We do have Aldea on campus. We have Up Valley on site 3 times a week. We've partnered with Claro y Clara, and our AVID goal number 3 is about building student agency in perceived issues on campus and then helping them have voice in the solution, which we are literally in the middle of doing that work right now. Lastly, based on scores of last year, we did reclassify 7 students this past summer. And the master schedule has been able to provide all of the PLC work, the access, as well as providing our ELD teacher to push in and co-teach with some students. So those are some actions I wanted to highlight. The data that are just hot off the Kelvin Pulse press. We have staff report. This is to speak to the culture and climate, kind of finishing where I started. 94% favorable rate of staff have a positive sentiment towards a safe and connected environment, and 80% of our staff feel that they have resources for coping and dealing with burnout. Please no, that does not say 80% of our staff are burned out. They have resources for coping with the work stress. Students, 75% overall favorable score. 73% report feeling emotionally safe and connected to the campus. 80% experience a culturally, linguistically responsive environment. What that means is 88% have believe that adults have high expectations for them and have communicated to them that they want them to work hard so they can do well in life. 80% have resources for coping. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Is there any public comment on this agenda item? No? Okay. Trustees, any questions? No, I'm just saying, like, you used the word revitalized in your presentation, and as I was reading your presentation, I felt that come through.
Oh, good.
I just want to share that I was very excited, and obviously for you to be here and putting, emotion and testament to what's on the slides further validates that the good work that's going on there. So
Thank you.
First and foremost, congratulations. It must be a great feeling. Those levels of engagement, to your point, it's a hard time.
Yeah.
It's a hard time in middle school, and I think those numbers speak well for that. And I think if you get them in, then you got them, right? Probably didn't hurt that you let them lock you in a cage, but
It is.
but I just wanted to start by that. But our questions and other comments, trustees.
Not a question. Surprise, surprise. I was just going to share that when we were just at the RLS 7th grade volleyball game, and we were talking about how I commented that when you went over to sit next to the students, you know, they were talking with you. He said, yeah, it's great when they don't disperse. And so I guess I wanted to also say it's not only did they not disperse, but they were all actively talking with you. So it's a wonderful
Thank you.
sight to see.
Thank you.
The kids wanting to talk to you. So not just
Thank you.
dispersal. Yeah. So
That means a lot. I
Yes.
appreciate that. It's a great place.
With your strategic plan, I really appreciate your goals. Really appreciate them around suspension and around increasing decreasing chronic sadness by 5% too. Perhaps those go hand in hand, so who knows?
so.
But I was also pleased to see that you were able to capture 85% of families that responded to the improved communication survey. So that goes back directly to how you've been communicating since the beginning of the year with the families to get that such a high percentage.
Thank you.
So well done, and
Thanks.
thank you so much.
I really appreciate that. I'm glad.
What's the secret formula on that, do you think? Is there, I'm just curious if there's an explanation that would,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I don't know. I guess there wasn't previously a middle school newsletter. So,
Okay.
And I don't mean to make.
No, I know
I'm
you-
wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. So I think it helps that there is one. I worked closely with colleagues about how they do theirs, and kind of wanted to model that so that parents kind of see something similar coming from the elementary and primary. And well, one of the things I mentioned in my interview was that I think there's a question about communication. And something that I think is important about communication is it needs to be clear, it needs to be consistent, and it needs to be concise. So I'm going for 2 for 3 for tonight, but it needs to be consistent. So parents regularly, I hope this is helpful, but they regularly know on Sunday afternoon, evening, they're going to get an email from me. It's going to have some ridiculous picture and some, Dr. Seuss quote in it or something ridiculous, something silly. But then there'll be meat and potatoes of the week. And so I think, I am trying to follow what I think helped get me that job. But consistency, clarity, and just simply having one. And then I think allowing it to build off what they've done, from coming from the elementary. Hopefully, it's something that you were expecting and then you got, and it's.
it's to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have another question?
Oh, do you have a question?
No.
No. So I've got the easy job because I can say ditto to all of this right here. And like I've said in the past, thank you for all of your work. As you, I said this the last board meeting when I did this is, it just feels really good on campus. It feels like it's very relaxed, but at the same time, kind of an urgency to keep learning type of a feeling from the students, and inquisitive, they're always curious, and I do really like your communication style with the students as well. I think that they feel very comfortable talking with you. I saw that for sure. But so regardless of all of that, thank you for everything.
Sure.
Thank you.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
Appreciate it.
And I think the only thing that I want to comment on is, knowing kind of what you inherited regarding discipline when you came on board. I know it was a hot topic. It was a button that was pushed, and I want to applaud the attention that you and the staff are giving to that. I think the restorative measures are hugely impactful, and it sounds like they're working, because we really do want the kids in the classrooms, right? We don't want them to not be at school. So I want to just truly applaud you and everybody at the campus for working on that and making that a priority, because, it's one of those reputations that seem to follow that school, and that reputation is shifting, and that doesn't happen without the work of you and your staff. So thank you for that.
And I appreciate you acknowledging also the staff too, because
Yes.
it's a team sport, and thank you for saying that, because maybe I didn't draw enough attention to that, but they're tremendous,
Yeah.
and they've been incredibly supportive of this, and they let me practice this
Yeah.
presentation to them a few times.
Well, that's
so.
great. I mean, I think it's great.
Thank you very much. President Pelosi.
Absolutely.
That means
Thank
a
you
lot.
very much for
Yeah.
this. Is a great snapshot for RLS, so appreciate that. Trustees, anything else in closing? Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Ryan. Okay. We're going to move on to 10B, consideration of approval for the 2024 through 2027 academic school year calendars. Mr. Heller, please.
Yes, good evening. Every 3 years, we convene a calendar committee to take a look at options for a 3-year calendar cycle. And this year, the calendar committee met once in the spring of last year and 3 times in the fall to take a look at the factors and considerations in developing the next cycle. The committee was composed of 15 participants representing a different range of groups, 2 students, 2 parents, 1 parent representing TK5, 1 parent representing grades 6 through 12, a school administrator, 4 SHTA members, teachers, 3 classified, 2 trustees, and then me. And so these representatives represented the best interests of their groups in providing feedback and guidance along the way. So along the way in September, we decided that one of the best things that we could do to help guide us through some of the conversations was to develop and administer a survey that collected feedback from staff, students, and parents. Keeping in mind that we do have constraints, that there's 182 required school days and 186 certificated work days to try to come together to develop an ideal calendar. So I'm going to go through and provide a quick overview of the survey. This survey, this is the exact PowerPoint that was presented to the committee, so it's unaltered. It's just the information that we use and help guide us in our decision making. The survey was administered during the first week of October. It was sent out to all staff, teachers, and students grades 8 through 11, figuring that they're the ones that will probably be in high school and be able to have them enough maturity to give us feedback of a relevant nature, and also through 2 parents on Parent Square. It was also posted on our district website, and it was closed on Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. And you can see the responses that we received, 373 in English and 24 in Spanish. And so we had a total of just under 400 responses. Are you clicking? Okay. I was like, I don't think I hit that. So there's the would you rather game. What would you rather do? And this one was, when do we begin in August? And in recent cycles, the calendar had really moved up earlier in August to accommodate our 3 recovery days, a 3-week winter break. So when you start adding days inside of the school year, one of the ends has to shift either earlier in August or later in June. So what has occurred in the last 3-year cycles, we began starting school a little bit earlier in August, and I think this one this year was very early, and it caused a lot of staff and parent and student frustration and concern as it ran up against the Napa County Fair. And so that was a kind of a key consideration as we began talking about this, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this was the response for when folks wanted to begin in the month of August. And then one of the considerations that the committee did want to talk about is, a concept that this district has not considered in some time, but the opportunity to take a look at Thanksgiving break and seeing if there was interest in having school either Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of that week, or Monday and Tuesday, and then having holiday on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And so overwhelmingly on this response that it seemed that people wanted to keep that Thanksgiving week break intact. Winter break. The district has had a couple different practices in the last 9 years where we've had a 3-week winter break. We've had a 2.5-week winter break. I don't believe we've had a 2-week winter break alone. Yeah, so it's either been 3 or 2.5. And so, it's kind of a mixed response here. And I have a subsequent slide at the end that kind of addresses some of the questions surrounding winter break about, well, if you have a 2-week winter break, some people will take a 3 weeks, or if you have 3 weeks, people are going to take 4, because of that time of year to where people want to travel and, be with family or go various places. So I'll address this again at the very end at the slide because we did a little data about absences during the month of December. President's Day, currently the district observes a 4-day weekend. Some other districts locally observe 2 3-day weekends to observe the Lincoln and Washington holiday, and our district structure has been a 4-day weekend incorporating a Friday and a Monday related to President's Day, and that seems to continue to be the preferred structure for that weekend. And then the last question that we asked was about spring break, and traditionally in many places, spring break either precedes or follows the Easter holiday. And we had a lot of conversation about that. And then we also had the conversation about placing spring break in the first week of April as we did this past cycle, which seems to kind of fall at a good spot in the calendar, preceding a lot of the testing windows that begin to open in late April and May. So it allows for a week and doesn't disrupt kind of the momentum going into our testing period. And then the last slide shows, students who were absent 3 or more days in December, as of December 2020, 21, and 22. 2020, we'd have to consider a little bit of an anomaly because of COVID. So those numbers may not be as reflective as as practice because we were in a Zoom. 2021, the numbers did increase, but it's all relative to your school size. So if you just take the primary school, for example, in 2021, if you had 12 classes there and you have 7 students who are out 3 days or more, that's less than 1 student per class. So I don't think it had a huge impact on student attendance. Okay, so that's the presentation that was given to the group. And so, the committee took all this information together and began to consider what are the best options. And first of all, I want to commend the committee members because we all know it's a difficult position we're going to have to make a decision. And there's a lot of different interests, a lot of different people who provided input would feel like, well, I voted for this and you did something different. But the group really kind of came together and it was a strong consensus building to arrive at calendars that we all agreed on. And I looked around the room and said, does anybody have any dissenting opinions on this? And there was no comment. And then I asked for a thumbs up to support the calendar. And it was unanimous through the entire room that everybody was supportive of the recommendations that we move forward. So really just to highlight the what is included in those calendars is really a tightening of the school calendar year. We used to start on a Wednesday, and it's recommended we would start on that subsequent Monday. So even if students are participating in the fair, there's a little bit of I don't know how much of a lag time there would be, but still a little bit of a break, so they don't immediately go from the hustle and bustle of the fair back into school. We're starting about the 3rd week of August is what the recommendation was. So the teachers would come back the Thursday and Friday for work days, and we would start school on a Monday. So that's a little different, but it's really a tightened calendar because it would start that 3rd week of August, and we would end in the 1st week of June, which allows for a longer summer period, which I know some of the families provided some feedback that they would rather have more time in the summer when students can be outside and be active than have a longer period in the winter where students are run out of things to do and there's less options for them to do in the winter. We also just recommend and point out that we removed the 3 recovery days that we built in to the school calendar and had some good discussion about that. Those were provided in the past just to ensure that at a time where we had a lot of chaos in the valleys here with fires and smoke and power interruptions, that was a way just to ensure that we were going to meet our minimum school days. But we do have 182 school days built into the calendar, and the state requires 180, and we could apply for a waiver if we were ever to dip below that 180. So we inherently have 2 extra days built into the calendar if those types of unfortunate things were to occur in the future. Continuing the 1-week Thanksgiving break. The bigger change was reducing the 3-week winter break to a 2-week winter break. And a lot of that was centered on, we asked our high school student, and she said, it's just too long. We feel like we lose momentum from semester to semester, and it just feels like I would rather have a 2-week nice break to end the semester, but start back up in a more timely fashion. As with this, as typical in this calendar and working on these calendars, there is a little bit of a difference in the fall semester to the spring semester. It's roughly, out of the 182 days, it's 82 days in the fall and about 100 in the spring. But if you take into consideration in the spring that many of those days are testing or potentially AP testing or whatever, it does kind of balance out a little bit closer, so it's not that much of a consideration. But when the high school is on a semester status or a semester rotation, and so the fall semester does end prior to winter break. So that's just something to keep in mind. We'll continue the 4-day President's Weekend, and spring break would be the first full week of April still. So everybody felt very comfortable moving that forward. And just to kind of clarify, we move it on, and Mark Lulsdorf is here, and he's welcome to come speak to this, but we provide this for SHTA to vote on, and it's more of a ceremonial vote in some ways, just to show support for the work that their 4 members did and say, we're in agreement with this. It is not actually, if it were to be voted down, the governing board is still the final one that votes on the calendar. So it's more of a recognition of effort by the vote. I recognize that there was a public comment that showed that it was pretty close tonight in their vote, that it was 40 to 38. But the point in there is that the SHTA did have members from each site that represented their site in the process, and like I said, when it came down to recommending the calendars to move forward, there was no dissenting opinions there at that time. So with all that information, unless there's any questions from the audience, I would recommend that the board approve the 3-year cycle.
Thank you, Mr. Heller. Is there anyone present who would like to publicly comment on this agenda item? That's yeah, that's fine. Yeah. And trustees, everybody had an opportunity to read the public comment that we had on the agenda. Okay. So are there any questions at this point, trustees?
Yeah, I have a question regarding, so we noticed tonight in the presentation that only 24 Spanish-speaking, there were 24 responses from Spanish-speaking participants. So I guess my question is, what are your thoughts on the low Spanish speaking responses received? Why do you think that they were only 24?
Well, I don't want to speculate.
Okay.
I could, I'll say this. I'll say sometimes, and Andrew kind of mentioned it in his report, if you don't reply, sometimes you're okay with whatever happens,
I see.
right? Like
Sure.
we
Yeah.
can ask for feedback, And if people think, you're doing a good job, I'm good with whatever you do,
Yeah.
there's no need for me to provide that feedback. My kids will be there. That's kind of the same approach that I've had with my children. It's just tell me when you want them to come to school and they'll be there. So
Okay.
I don't want to speculate why there
Of
was a
course.
low number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can add, all the staff responses are also in English, so you don't get any there in Spanish as well.
Right, yeah. I also appreciate that 182 days does give us a 2-day buffer for fire days in the future. So thank you for putting that into the schedule.
Well, that's in there every year. So that's a negotiable piece of the contract,
Okay.
and so that is something that's been in place since I've been here, is 182 days.
With the removal of the this explicit fire days. It's nice
Yeah,
that
so
we
that's
have
a
the
good point.
182.
The fire recovery days are only used if we were to need them, so they end up being essentially local holidays here. And then those will actually appear here in the spring, because we won't need those days, hopefully, and then they just become local holidays for us. So students and staff won't be in school that day.
Okay.
Trustees, anything else? Okay. And I, as somebody who sat on those committee meetings, one of the overwhelming commentaries that from the get-go is school started too early. I don't know if you heard that out in the community as well, but it was a resounding, like, this was, it was ridiculous. It was just too early, but just from where I sit, it's like, it's very challenging to give everybody everything that they want, right? So if the overwhelming feeling is we have to start, in the mid to late August, well, there are trade-offs. That's what Mr. Heller saying. If you want to start later, it means that something has to be shorter somewhere along the way. And there's been plenty to the students, to what you said about the students saying 3 weeks is long. I've heard from teachers 3 weeks can be long, particularly in the younger grades, and then coming back after 3 weeks, and that it can take another whole week to reacclimate, relearn classroom rules and etiquette, and then they're losing another, 3 to 4 days of, just focusing on that as well. So, there's no doubt that this doesn't please everybody, right? But the overriding premise of when you go into this is what is best for students. And that's what we tried to collect through the surveys. And I think Mr. Heller did a really nice job of facilitating the meetings. Everybody had a voice. There was no contention in those meetings. And everybody felt like, it's going to be a shift. There's some shift, but ultimately it's serving our students. So I just kind of give you my 2 cents of sitting on those committees.
Thank you. And I do want it to be noted at the dais that the families in primary through middle school may not know, but another major academic reason to start later is because of the FFA and the county fair, and that we had, I believe, 24 high school students miss the first few days of school and 2 teachers. And it's been that way for several years, which can be very disruptive. So for that reason, I'm really pleased that we're allowing those students to begin with their classmates and allowing the teachers to prep accordingly and begin on the first day of school.
Agree.
Mr. Heller, I've got one question. And you might have mentioned this, and I maybe not heard it. For classified staff, did they vote like the SHTA, kind of in a formal way, or?
No, they have not in the past. It's been more of because classified staff works 10, 11, and 12 months, it's a little different than SHTA, so it's more in alignment with the school year calendar with the teachers who are working that particular year. Classified works around that schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds like you said that in the past, they haven't been surveyed in the past.
They haven't been surveyed, but they have a seat at the
At the
table.
table,
Yeah,
that's what
they
it
have
looks like.
3
Right.
members there.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, I could just, to ditto, I filled in, I don't know for who, for the calendar committee where they presented the calendar, and just to reiterate, it was unanimous. There was no, oh, this is going to be a real problem. It was, we're solving the problem of mainly like the disruption with the fair, with so many students, especially freshmen starting off without a teacher. Their first day was, and there were actually middle schoolers, I think, also participating in the fair. Okay. Not just high schoolers. But, you know, so I, just to reiterate that all the groups were represented there, and even a comment was made of, wow, this was worked well. The understanding the trade-off of starting a little bit later, there was no contention at all.
And I see here that that it was emailed to all teachers and staff, and it's Parent Square. It was shared by Parent
Correct.
Square. Okay, so everyone got the message then that that it was happening.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, you got that as a
I
parent.
received it as a parent, yes.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, trustees? No? Okay. So with that, is there a motion to approve the calendar for 2024-27 academic school years as presented?
Motion to approve?
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Madrigal will conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Mora?
Aye.
Trustee Simon?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you so much. Thank you to the
Thank
committee
you.
for all the work on that. We're going to take a 5-minute quick recess, and we'll be right back. Thank you. There. Okay. Oh, there I am. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Because I was talking and my microphone wasn't on, and you know how I love a microphone. Okay, we are reconvening at 7:22, and we're going to jump right back into item 10C, approval of the 2022-23 English Language Learner Master Plan. Miss Veronica Miranda, please.
Yes, so this EL master plan is coming to you with very minor revisions. So you've had it in the district, and I actually don't recall exactly when it was implemented. My apologies for that. But I know that it's been after 2017 because that's when the EL roadmap came into play. So this EL master plan serves for the district as a guidance document and also a compliance piece. So that's what I did as I went through it, is ensuring that all the compliance pieces were there. And they also consolidate and provide information for our educational stakeholders so that our programming for English learners or emerging bilinguals provide align itself as our students go from TK2 to 3.5 to 6.8, 9.12. And so that piece was fully there. Additionally, actually, with this master plan, I've looked through several over the years, provided data for you. So that's kind of a moving piece there. So the updates to that information, because the dashboard hasn't been fully released yet, not all the information is sitting there for you. So looking at those pieces, it incorporates, and I think this piece is important as I use the word emerging bilinguals, an assets-oriented approach to how we are providing or supporting our students in our district. So to give you the picture, and just as a refresher, we have 145 English learners across our district, which equals about 14%. Now, those are English learners or emerging bilinguals. That doesn't count the number of students that have been reclassified. So one of the things I noticed, like when I was looking through numbers in first grade, we have 5 English learners. I'm like, that's a very low number. That is because the year before, 6 of our students were reclassified. So that is something that I'm not doing a full presentation for you today, but to let you know, at another time I could come back and really provide some more in depth. There were some questions that came from board members, about the action that, it's a plan. So the actions actually fall in what you saw today. RLS provided an English learner goal. And so that is where, I'm going to say the magic, that is where it's happening. As a district, as small as we are, we're still prioritizing, even though we have a small number. Every school site has an English learner coordinator or a teacher that serves. So even though our numbers are small, they have a free period. I shouldn't say free period. They are allowed a portion of the day to provide services. I also meet with that group to really review the processes and procedures to ensure that our students are getting what they need. The other component that is sitting in there is how this information is given to our parents. So in our ELAC or English Learner Advisory Committees that happen at the school sites, and the DLACs, the District English Language Advisory Committee, one of the things I also need to do is in chunks, because this is a big document, providing the information to parents, specifically in the area of reclassification. What does that look like? What does that mean? And really the piece is, how does my student get there? That is sent back to the school site so that we can have those individual meetings. So any questions additionally for me?
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who wishes to publicly comment or on Zoom who wishes to make a public comment on this agenda item? Okay. Trustees, questions, comments for?
Thank you for that. This, hopefully you can remember these names, but who are the EL, instead of ELD, but who is the coordinator at
Sure.
each site?
Sure.
So I am aware.
Sure. I'm going to say if I miss a last name, let me know.
Put you on the spot.
So, and at the primary is Ms. Jocelyn Ivanov. Thank you. At the elementary school we have, and there's Miss Dana Simon. Oh, sorry, there's 2. Oh my gosh. Yes, there's 3 Danas. Ms. Dana Tucker. I have the picture in my brain. And then our RLS, it's Miss Dana Simon.
Who was the elementary was who?
Elementary was Dana Tucker.
Okay.
Dana Tucker, and then RLS is Dana Simon, and then at our high school we have Miss Elizabeth Ganshorn. Okay, so.
Okay, thank you.
And I appreciate the highlights to a document for our benefit. That is very helpful. So thank you for providing that. And then when you made a comment that the dashboard, of course, is not fully uploaded with all the relevant, will you come back to us with updated information after, towards the end of the year then on, is that something that's,
Well, we will do a full dashboard presentation.
Yes.
It
Okay.
publicly releases tomorrow.
right?
But we'll come back for that.
Okay.
Specifically, if we want an EL update, we can do that as well.
And one of the things I think that I would recommend is, I know that it's coming, last year you reviewed, and it's coming to you every year, the EL master plan for
Yeah.
reviews. And I think it is important to include the data. I'd like to move those as an appendices at the end, because that
Okay.
would make the most sense. And really bringing this to you when it's been released so that it makes sense.
Yeah.
And one of these things I didn't do as I presented for you is I didn't do a presentation just on EL. That might be something to consider for next year, is bringing you the EL master plan, but really just providing you a presentation on EL progress. That might be also helpful in
I
chunking
think
the
it would
data.
be good. My sense is that that would be something the board would be interested in, so.
So for kind of procedural, then we would add that to our governor's calendar then at the specific times?
Yes, I would, that's the way I would interpret that.
Okay.
Would you interpret that as well, Ms. Madrigal? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that'd be great.
That
And
would be
we'll be
great.
on the lookout for the dashboard.
Yeah. I have a quick question. For the DLAC and ELAC meetings, are they well attended at this time, or what's your thought about that?
So I can speak to DLAC, and
Okay.
in my in the board highlights that you'll get this week, I have some strategies. I've been kind of looking at how we engage our parents at a district level. We've seen low attendance from our Latino community, just in attendance. So they've been attended, not as well attended. So the first one I actually went out to the apartments, and we had about 5 or 6 parents. The second one I had 2, and I did evening, and then I did morning, and then what I'm doing is connecting with, I'm going to call them parent ambassadors, so to find out what will work for them. So they've given me some feedback, and I have a couple of other little cafecito or chats with parents. So at this level, they haven't been as well attended. However, DLAC is really meant to have a parent representative. So it's more about, I need to engage and really connect to who that parent representative is for each of the school sites, because ELAC then feeds to DLAC. And then DLAC is really that stakeholder group that will provide feedback for LCAP or other plans that we're working on. For ELAC, I would have to ask our principals as far as what that is. I did, like in RLS, I did support or come to an RLS at the beginning of the year, and we had a couple. Yeah, so if you could speak to that, or just say, what is that looking like for you at the sites for ELAC attendance?
Come to the microphone, please, as I don't have my microphone on.
Carmen can add in, but we're together because we have been doing our ELACs since last year as one site, as a K-5 site. So one thing that we have found to be helpful is we have done, especially in the fall, we have kind of centered our ELAC meetings around a theme, which was our Hispanic Heritage event. So we would weave in some school announcements, required ELAC topics, but also work with the parents to plan that event. And we actually did those meetings on Zoom because we actually had up to 15 parents in attendance. And it seemed like for the purpose of that information, as much as we do want to do things in person, it just seemed like it was easier for our families to participate that way. So our goal, because we do our parent coffee chats every month, Carmen and I together, and we don't have as many Spanish-speaking parents attend as English. There's definitely more English, but our goal has been to then do an evening night on Zoom to kind of make sure parents in Spanish can get in touch with, talk about our school events and weave in those topics.
Right.
Do you want to add anything?
Well, this year, I think it's been a little bit tougher to get our Spanish-speaking community to come up. However, in PTG, we have had about 2 to 3 at each PTG meeting, which was unheard of last year. So this year, at least, we've had more of that. And our Zoom meetings are Spanish speaking. So if someone that wants to join in English, we would translate for them, but they're Spanish speaking. And that seems to help that attendance. knowing that it's specifically for them. And the other thing that helps also is that they are centered not just about learning about what we do and what we have to do for ELs, but how we support our English learners, but more so how the parents can help to create something. So they really come because, not because it's an ELAC, but because we're getting ready for the Fiesta de Octubre. Or now in January, we're getting ready for the Dia del Niño, which will happen in April. And they really seem to like having that purpose where there's something to be working towards. So that's helping. But we asked them a number of times, at least once last year and once this year, do you want us to continue to do this in Zoom, or do you all want to come in? And it was hands down Zoom. It doesn't even start till 6:30, so it just seems to be more convenient.
I'll just add really quickly. Last year, we did do some meetings at the primary in person that were like parent trainings that were well attended. So I do want to voice the importance of that. And then Carmen probably doesn't even know this yet, but our families will be invited. But in March, one of our teachers is going to be doing a program called Latino Family Literacy, which is going to be teaching parents how to work with their students at home around literacy in Spanish. Our Spanish teacher's going to be teaching that class, and so that'll obviously be in person. And so I think that'll be a great opportunity to weave to also kind of call that an ELAC as well, just because we're hopefully going to have a base of parents there who will be taking that class.
Great, thank you.
Show-offs. Wish I went first. That sounds fantastic. So we got off to a bang with our ELAC. We had, at the beginning of the year, we had great attendance. And at our first PG meeting, probably about 15 folks. And then we partnered and went to Hunt's apartment complex, and the attendance wasn't there. We varied the location, we varied the time, we offered dinner, we had daycare. It wasn't there. So there was talk early on with Mr. Cinto and myself of maybe trying to do the same thing that they're doing, that didn't materialize. So as I'm listening to them speak, all joking aside, I mean, this is a pretty small district, and that's a luxury, and many of our families have students across the school. So you both may not know this yet, but maybe we can team up with that. But at any rate, we do have more scheduled, and we will continue to promote them. But I am looking for more creative ways to build that. We started, and the same thing with PG. To be fair, there was a huge meeting, and then there was a middle-sized meeting, and then there were about 5 folks. So, and I get it. It's middle school, so that's going to happen. But this was pretty inspirational. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm going to add that, over the years, as I worked with parents, parent engagement is my passion. The connection with them is so important. And so I'm going to say Latino culturally, it is about them. There's been change in administration. So part of that is getting to know them, hearing their stories. So one of the things that I can already relate and say, yes, it's true. They said, if we come, so the parents that I've talked to, if we come, it's got to be something that is meaningful to us. Not just information. So when they come, is if there's a student event, if they're going to make something, if they're going to connect. Yes, if there's food, yes, that helps. Daycare, yes, that helps. The other thing in this community is evenings. They actually said Zoom works well for us when I talked in the evenings because of working parents. They're not able to leave. They have to, just like families, but just traditionally just being able to be home. So if we do evening meetings for them, Zoom is preferable. And they're like, because some of us work in wineries around this area, our companies are sometimes flexible. If we ask our boss, our patron, for time in the morning, they might be flexible. So we are more likely to come in the mornings. So just trying to find where the pieces are for families. And then they also said, which I haven't shared with them, is like, can you give us papel? Can you give us paper, for the primary? It's like, yes. So Parent Square, that's a disconnect because we've transitioned with our platform, and we will get our parents there. But with the little people still checking backpacks. So if that sometimes helps with flyers, but they also need to hear it. So this is where this parent ambassador comes in. They need to hear it from their neighbor. They need to hear it from someone trusted. This is important. They will call. So that is the network that we need to build. And one more plug, the Latino Literacy Project that Ms. Rocha is talking about. I did that about 20 years ago. I was the one who delivered it. I can tell you some data that I have. I educated over the years, probably, I'm going to say 40 parents through that program. I kept in touch with about 20 families. And when I look at these mamas that still call me, if I were to do data, I would say 75%, because I did, 75% of those moms that came from immigrants from other countries, their kids have gone to college and have jobs as counselors, and they are working as engineers. And it is just amazing. But it is about connecting with parents and keeping them as champions, giving them a voice. That's what we have. And we have families, they stay. So I think we might change because administrators do, but we need to build those parent leaders to be able to connect to the schools and find a place.
Right. I very well stated, without a doubt. And we have witnessed what that connection can do. When we had a social worker who took engagement to another level in this district. So hopefully that will be able to come back into our district as well. It's a different conversation. I won't go down that road, but I think anybody who's blessed to be bilingual, use those skills and get on out there, because that's really vital for connecting with that population of our community. Thank you. Okay. So with that,
I have a question.
Yes, you have a question, please.
Are we now not using the term English learner? It's emerging bilingual?
I wanted to get the board to be used to the English, the emerging bilingual, but EL is what you're going to hear primarily in California. So I use that right now because of the asset-based approach, as far as acknowledging that a student is becoming bilingual and not just an English learner. So it's just the term, but I think until we talk with the board, I think for you, thank you for clarifying, Sean, is being clear that we'll use EL because that is still the term that is used in California.
Okay.
And so if you hear me, I'll use both.
Okay.
But it's the EL piece, okay?
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Anything else, trustees? Okay. Okay, so this is an action item, yes, okay. So with that, is there a motion to approve the 2022-23 English Language Learner Master Plan as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Madrigal will conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Mora?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Miranda, for your work on that. Okay, now we're going back up to item 8, which is board-related items, and we're going to go on to letter A, district enrollment process, December update. Mr. Aurelio, please.
Good evening, everyone. Is this on? Yeah, okay. Sorry. If we can pull up the presentation, perfect. So continuing our discussion around enrollment process, I bring to you this evening a few updates. Really, if we go to the next slide. I centered this update primarily on the questions that were posed by the trustees at the last session. And so I will be moving through these 4 questions, and tonight's item is just a discussion item. We're not taking any action this evening, and just providing the information. We also know that 2 of our trustees are not in the room at the time, and they will watch this presentation later, so that when we come back at a later date, we'll have the same information. Next slide, please. So one of the questions was, what happens if we do change course and shift from district of choice to an inter-district permit process, primarily with our current DOC students, those who have already enrolled with us, who have been attending our schools. And so there is education code that outlines exactly what happens if we move away from district of choice. And the only students that would automatically get to remain under the district of choice as kind of treated like resident students are our high school age students. So TK through 8th grade, any DOCs, regardless of when they entered our school district, would have to revert to an inter-district permit process, meaning they would have to return to their resident school and get the permit, the release from their district, and then we would have to approve it here. Next slide. So I do want to preface this because we heard earlier today some data around RLS and suspension. and there's a mismatch here, and I just want to be clear about that. That is actually part of something we've been discussing in the discipline committee around how we're entering information into Aries. So take this with a grain of salt, especially on the RLS numbers here. These are 18 total incidences for the high school and RLS. Ironically, it's the same number there of suspendable incidents. There are some duplications in how we've entered data because there's been maybe multiple codes used for one incident. Just to clarify, the important item here is, and the question was, what does the data tell us about discipline in relation to our district of choice students? The perception being, do we see more disciplinary challenges with district of choice versus, say, our resident students in this situation? The high school, the data is really not showing us that there's any more or less discipline issues. At RLS, it's a little skewed there. I will say that there are some repeat offenders in that process. So when I look at the district of choice makeup, even though there's 18 incidences, it did account for 3 students only. Next slide, please. There was a question about just getting the average class sizes for our core instructional classes, and for me, core is your English language arts or reading, your mathematics courses, your science courses, and your social science courses. And so you can see the high school on the left, RLS on the right, the average class sizes for those core classes, the median class size, and then the range. Just to be clear, the 5 that you see at the high school, that is a section of physics. The 29 is a section of ag bio, which is a 9th grade course, which is just a testament to, I think, that teacher and the request that they're getting for that course, which is really nice to see. In the middle school, the 9, I did a notation there. That is the last cohort of our 8th graders in integrated math 1. If you remember, that's being phased out. And then the rest, those are just a range to 24. Next slide. So this is a pretty complex slide because it was a very complex question to try to answer, which is, what is the average cost per pupil to educate in St. Helena? For the trustees, we just recently had a study session, and so I used the same comparable districts in trying to answer this question. Districts that we've looked at both academic data and also tend to mirror us in the sense of basic aid and funding as well. And the orange dot on this chart represents St. Helena. The teeny tiny dots represent the other 12 to 14 districts that are on this list. The gray range is the range per pupil funding. So the first category at the very, very top is essentially all dollars spent on what's categorized as instruction. That's salaries of teachers, that's books, that's all this variety of pieces. And as you can see, we're far to the right. We spend on average per pupil over $18,000 on just the category of instruction. We know we've used the number of roughly 32,000 per pupil expenditure, and that is true when you factor everything else that goes into funding education for students. That's your building, that's your fixed costs as well. But I wanted to show that because the next closest on the list you can see is around $15,000 per pupil to fund instruction. And I think when we think about when we add kids, that divisor is what grows. So that number would be reduced per pupil. Essentially what I'm trying to say is we probably could add kids and still be on the far right of this list in our expenditures per pupil. It's not going to tremendously impact when we add students on the per pupil expenditure for instruction, because that's probably the best way to say it. It would take a lot of students to really impact that number for us. In the last slide is just our next steps. I'll keep it brief. We will be coming back in January. Our next step in setting our enrollment caps for the 24-25 school year cycle. As you recall, we are going to be doing district of choice for next year. And then we would be coming back later to make a final decision on moving forward beyond year 24-25 if we will remain in district of choice or switch to inter-district permit. And as a reminder, what do we get for each one? If we stay the course with district of choice, we know we do get some additional funding from our LCFF revenue limit districts. This year was roughly $180,000 per year. We also know that via the district of choice process, the resident district really can't limit that permit unless we are really taking a lot of kids. It's a fairly automatic process if we enroll a district of choice child into our district. Switching to IDA, we do get the ability to revoke a district permit. We would have parameters set up around attendance, around discipline, and around academic performance. So that gives us that option to remove a child. Currently, the only way a district of choice child could be removed from our district would be through the expulsion process. Now, noting that IDA would not garner any additional funding tied like the district of choice. With every student, we do get some level of funding around ADA, lottery funds, things we saw in the first interim. So that is the update. I'll take any questions and open it up for any discussion.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who would, present or via Zoom, who would like to publicly comment on this agenda item? No? Trustees, questions?
I don't know which slide, sorry, but going to the one about the discipline and the data being incorrect for RLS, do you know what the accurate number is and the slide's just wrong?
We heard, and our principal is here, he mentioned eight
Eight,
suspensions,
eight.
but if he wants to come up, he can probably give us a little more insight. I will caution us, I don't want to identify any students in this process,
Of
so
course.
I want to keep that pretty vague.
So the reason there's a discrepancy is in the idea of keeping students in class, but also providing an appropriate consequence and an appropriate educational component. We, or I decided on a few of these incidents to do an in-school suspension coupled with an at-home suspension so that at least, the offense warranted more than the 1 day. However, I didn't want to send the students home when we could provide them with some resources while at school. The problem with Aries, the problem is that within Aries, you can't assign one offense to two dispositions, or it double counts them. So the number I'm very excited. The number I provided was accurate. That is accurate if you double count some of them. So,
Okay.
yeah. So that is a topic in the discipline subcommittee, which is, I was referencing some conversation about calibration of offense, and yeah, so that's what that is.
I guess then are you unable, if it's 8 suspensions, is it roughly 50-50 still?
Well, what I can tell you is the makeup. So, actually, it's the same. If I'm thinking number of students, it's still 3 DOC students at the middle school and 3 DOC students at the high school that have had incidences this year.
Okay, thank you.
If that helps.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And then you just mentioned something about for IDA students, the funding comes through like some LCF, the ADA money we would get, and some lottery money, right?
Lottery money, Dr. Vang can correct me if I misspoke, but I believe there's some other pots of dollars. They're not huge amounts of money, but do travel with students based on just our number of students, our ADA. IDA students and DOC students make up our ADA.
Right.
And so anything tied to ADA, they would be garnering some funding.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Regardless of the path that they become our student.
Correct.
Okay.
We don't get the core sort of funding that the LCFF formulates
yes.
for revenue limit.
Okay.
But these categorical dollars, we
Okay, categorical dollars.
like
Okay, dollars.
Title I, if they're in a category, we would get their Title I dollars.
Okay.
Okay, and just to clarify, with DOC, if we go to IDA, there may be instances, the district that they're coming from may have the option to say no. Is that correct?
Technically, the resident district would have
Resident
to
district.
approve that permit
Had
for
to
them to
approve
come.
it, right?
And they don't have to.
Only for K to 8.
K to 8.
Okay. TK, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
TK.
Okay,
We don't have
TK,
any TK this year, but
Okay.
K to 8.
And what's your thought about that? I mean, do you hear, have you been hearing of districts that are not approving? Just because of declining enrollment and wanting to, they're an ADA district and they want to hold on to their,
So my experience in districts who have dealt with declining enrollment, you typically you're hesitant to release your students.
Yeah.
The difference for us would be that these students are already with us. And so a change, they'd be going back to the district and asking for a release, even though you might have students who are, say, in 5th grade this year who have only attended St. Helena schools because that's when they entered. There's no guarantee, but typically a district is not going to refuse that because that student has never been with them.
Okay.
But moving forward, any new permits, you're less likely to release those students if you
Okay.
can,
okay,
because you want to hold on to your students.
right. So it would be the future.
You would impact your future
the
students.
future students.
And it does add a level of stress to our families who are already
Right,
with
that's
us.
exactly right.
here.
That's my thought about that, yes.
It does.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I guess just to share where I'm feeling about what I've heard or learned today. So going to the first slide about shifting from DOC to IDA, I would be very concerned about losing families in K through 8 that are already part of our community. That would not, I would not feel comfortable with that. So that scares me, I guess. Not really scared, but I wouldn't want that. Then if you go to the discipline, if it looks like the data is saying there is not a problem, there's nothing specific going on. So I also feel that that's not an issue, just from what I'm seeing. So thank you for clarifying the suspension. And the rest is just useful data. But I guess that's what I'm sensing right now for how I feel about DOC versus IDA.
Yeah, I would concur, particularly any data that I've received as a board member has not swayed me to say that DOC students make up a bulk of our discipline issues. And I know that there was some feedback on the surveys we got about that, but from what we're hearing, that doesn't really prove to me that there is. So that's one thing that I will concur with Trustee Mora on. I think the IDA, one of my concerns is staff capacity. That's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of tracking. I'm only going back from when we used to do it, and I know that we can create our own policy of what we're going to require, but we haven't seen a sample of any policy to date that I'm aware of. So, that also, I'm just wondering, I think about more like at the TK8 levels about the unintended stress and pressure it would put on families to maintain a GPA. Like if a kid bombs on one test and that, I don't know, it just seems a little punitive in nature. And again, I'll reiterate staff capacity to track all these things: tardiness, chronic absenteeism, GPA. I think those were the three main components of our IDA policy back when I can recall. So I think, I also would be concerned about losing students that have been with us. Now, maybe it's not likely if they've been with us from the get-go, but if the possibility exists, I think we have to acknowledge it. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I just know how the families were feeling last summer when they weren't sure if they were going to be able to get in this year, and to have that stress on families wondering whether their students going to be able to continue here because of what their resident district might decide. And I think it's just too stressful for a family for that. That's my own opinion on that. And certainly the discipline is similar to what the other trustee said about the discipline. It's looking as though it's not, the DOC students aren't making up the majority of the discipline situations.
Okay.
You know, and I,
Go ahead.
and then this is just a thought when you said something how we haven't seen any. Do you think that it would be helpful for us when we're making the decision to kind of look at a past IDA agreement to kind of see what that looks like? Or do you think we should just start from fresh? Because we've had agreements, way back. And we could be able to see that contract to say, oh, wow, this is really hefty and difficult to manage, or it's not. Or should we just make the decision before we go that route? And that is just a question. And you certainly don't have to respond right now.
No, and I appreciate that. I just, it's one of those things like, to me, if a decision is going to be made about the path of which we allow non-resident students in, it's hard for me to support fully because I don't even know what a current IDA policy would look like in 2024, 25. I mean, I'm going back 12 years,
Easily, yeah.
easily. So, I just don't know if it looks the same. I don't know. And maybe there's only 3 of us here right now in this discussion, so I don't know. But I think if we had, even if it was like a template to some degree to see, like this is what would require. And I just also think I'd like to know, like, is this going to fall on site secretaries to do all this? Is this going to fall on Miss Magical in her office? I think that's a real consideration that we have to take into play before we just say go ahead and do it and then realize we're increasing somebody's work level tremendously. I'll stop there.
And I recall, and I'm certainly not trying to, push this down, way out that there, I'm not trying to, what do you say that where you're like pushing it off, not making a decision, kicking the can. I'm not trying to kick the can, believe me, I'm not. But so it seems to me that we have until like August or September of next year to make the decision about whether we decide to leave district of choice or not.
We have to, I would like us to be done before June to make that decision.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not a decision we're making, like I said, this evening. Or
Right, no, I know we're not
even
making it this
in
evening,
January
but-
when we bring caps, those are separate things.
Okay.
I mean, and then we probably, and I'm sure Dr. Vang, you can respond to this as well, is that, while it's not a tremendous amount of money, DOC brings in $188,000, and we don't know what IDA funding, what that would total. But I would imagine, do you think it would be anywhere near that ballpark? No. Okay. That's what I didn't think. So, $188,000 is not nothing. So helps keeps the light on, right? Okay. So with that, I guess, do you have enough for the next step?
I do. Well, for us, next steps is to address the caps.
Caps, that's next month.
This discussion, I will put some things together and share with trustees prior to bringing it back for some decision.
Right. Because I think the board heard loud and clear from surveys and from, community members and whatnot, declining enrollment is a real concern. So we have to acknowledge we're trying to protect that by allowing other students in our district and just figuring out the best path. to
Right,
do
exactly. I think we all agree that we do want
Yes.
additional students, but just how do we do it?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess I would just say that DOC would preserve what we have. IDA, we could potentially lose if we shifted.
Potentially.
So that's, in my mind, that's a big differential of, regardless of our caps, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now 8B is the report on the CSBA Annual Education Conference. Mr. Aurelio, please.
Good evening, everyone, again. So we, the governance team and some staff attended the California School Boards Association Annual Education Conference, and that was held in San Francisco. And this is an opportunity for us to share some reflections on that, 4-day conference for some, 3 for others. Some of us did some pre-conference sessions. And so if we can go to the next slide. So we have a couple trustees not in the room, but these are the written reflections. These are the reflections from Trustee Wolf, and you can see some highlights. I did ask the trustees to provide sort of their top 3 highlights of the conference. We did a lot more than these 3 things over those days. It was very full sessions each day. Trustee Mora, you are next. If there's anything you want to add.
I mean, no, it's written
I know,
there,
it's
so
written.
I don't want to reiterate. I mean, I think that maybe the only thing that's not really clear at the 3rd bullet is what I found really useful. We talk a lot about how college is not always the path of success for each student, and so I thought what was interesting about the visual in the keynote, they have a visual of a tree. And it talked about, like, when you're in chemistry class, here are the low-level careers that you, let's see, that was bad. It was the limbs, the entry-level positions of the limbs on the bottom of the tree, saying when you graduate high school and you have taken chemistry, here are the jobs that you can have. And then there are, like, the CTE type classes or degrees that could be a little bit higher in the limbs, which is a little bit more education than a high school diploma, and then on up. And I just thought that was a really cool idea to have in physics and chemistry and biology and math, in even well, yes, in our FFA CTEs, welding, and it was just a really great visual. And they found that students who are like, I don't like school at all, I do not want to go to college, and to look at, oh, well, look, just by doing this welding class, I could have this job. So I just thought that was a really neat way to connect with a student, who just to open up ideas. And every year, hey, where do you think you want to be this year on the tree in this class? And then next year, let's reevaluate it, because how many of us have switched careers from what we thought we were going to be when we were in high school? So it was a great conversation.
And the next slide, those are reflections from Trustee Simon. You can see those there. Formerly Vice President Kerr. I made this slide before the change.
So the one thing that I wanted to touch on, and this is something that it was the ChatGPT as a tool for teaching and learning. And so what I thought it was interesting about that one was it was Santa Cruz City Schools. It was their it was a presentation by them, and I'm just looking at my notes to see. It was a board member, an English teacher, an ed tech, which was a teacher on a special assignment, director of learning and achievement, and the superintendent that was discussing AI and ChatGPT in particular, and what it was a time when it first started coming out, and New York basically banned it. They said, no, we're banning it, we're not doing it. And so they started the conversation about whether they should go forward with any kind of AI type of things within their district, or ban it, such as New York. And what I felt was really impressive about that is just how they came together as a whole district to discuss it. Everyone was part of the conversation, and at the end of the day, they decided to go forward with ChatGPT and to be using it in the classrooms. And then the English teacher was really knowledgeable and very thoughtful in the way that he talked about it and how he used it in his classroom, and I thought that I was really impressed with that. So regardless of all of that, it made me think about how we might need to start having this conversation about what we would like to see our students use and our teachers use any type of AI type of technology within our district. So that's what I got. That was the reflection from that one. And quickly with the student board one, it was really good. We can actually include our student board member in even more so than what we're doing right now, and we can talk about that at a separate meeting. But it was and it's easy things like having the student board representative have a board mentor just to get them up to speed. And even our student board representative Wagner, she mentioned to me that she didn't even really know the structure of the school district when she began her job as the thing. And that's things that we could talk about. We could help them learn kind of how it all works. Also, they mentioned that the student board representative would be part of like teacher appreciation type of events where they're talking about their teachers and what their experiences is. And she said, there's never a dry eye in the room when the student board representative is speaking on, about the teachers within the district. So just things for us to consider in the future.
President Pelosi, I think you're next.
Yeah, so they both took all my my highlights. So I don't really have. But one of the things I want to say, because it's important for everybody who sits in this room to know, is that the realization I had yet again at this CSB conference is I sit through these presentations and I have a sense of pride and gratitude for the people and the places of St. Helena Unified School District. We are extremely fortunate in so many respects, but a big part of it is the people who teach our students, who work at our schools, who keep our facilities going, and who run our district. And that is always a huge takeaway, and I'm come away with such gratitude for all of you because we are quite lucky in that respect. So thank you. So that's my overriding theme. I attended a lot of AI because I wanted to be demystified for me. And to Trustee Kerr's point, of which I've already put a bug in the superintendent's ear for a spring presentation on the role of AI at St. Helena Unified. Because whether, it's here, it's here. I mean, we use it, we all use it in our everyday lives. And it would be helpful to know, and I was at that presentation, I believe, with you, and that English teacher was showing the samples of AI generated paragraph response in the AP Lit class versus what a student would do versus what the AI response was. And because, of course, the overriding reputation is cheating and plagiarism and all those things. But they helped dispel that a bit with that presentation to say the teacher could tell right away which was the AI generated paragraph because it wasn't personalized enough and it covered topics that wasn't even discussed in the AP Lit class but was in the answer. So he said, he was just trying to help all of the older people in the room understand that, it's not there to take away the human component to learning. So I look forward to that in the spring. And my other notes are there. Also student voice, which I've already also put a bug in the superintendent's ear about the role of our student board rep and how that can really be changed. So, and expanded and whatnot. So I'll thank you very much. And I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to get to go to those conferences. Thank you.
Thank you all. And just the last slide is staff reflection. I ditto a lot of what was said. It was clearly an AI component to this conference. Demystifying. I heard things like having guardrails around using and not being afraid of the use of AI, but really instructing how to use it appropriately. I mean, as I say, the cat's out of the bag. If we don't think our kids are using it, they are. And that's just, we can't avoid that. So let's embrace it and do it in a way that's healthy and showing our students. One of the things that I immediately came back and talked to staff about was during our full day legal symposium. That was a pre-conference session. That was a really great session to be at, to learn about the changes that are coming down the line. One thing that we're already starting to discuss is our Title IX process and making sure that we have a Title IX team. Prior to that, Mr. Heller was the team. So we are going to be implementing a few changes just to to protect us as a district and making sure we're doing everything the right way. But yeah, fantastic session. There we are, picture of us in San Francisco, and yeah, always a great time to go to these and learn from others. I really appreciate hearing other trustees from other districts and their experiences. And some of that happens in more of the informal settings at those conferences. So thank you.
Anaheim or bust 2024. That's that's the next one. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item 9, communications. We have 9A is board member reports, and I just want to remind the trustees that this is a written report from Trustee Simon. She did a nice job, and I really appreciated the information she shared with us through that. 9B is the superintendent's report. So, Mr. Aurelio, please.
Okay, great. I didn't know I was going to be speaking so many times in a row. So just reflecting over the past month, which feels like we blinked and it was a month because there was so many different things going on. I wanted to just quickly touch on at some point during that time frame, the leadership team, principals, and cabinet, we did a refresher on Data Zone. It's one of our data platforms that we use internally. So it's not necessarily public-facing data, but it's data that we have access to, and it's a pretty comprehensive platform. It has academic data, it has attendance data. It's a dashboard that Santa Clara Office of Education puts together for us and gives us access. So we're able to look at not just summative data, but also local data. So our MAP scores are in there as well. And so that's something that we need to remind ourselves that we have access to this platform, that we can use this platform. I know some of our site administrators are using that with their teachers. So that was really great, and that's going to be utilized more often as we meet moving forward. We've already talked about the conference. Some really great events that we had. We did our years of service recognition. I think we had someone recognized for 30 years of service. So we recognize in 5-year increments from 5 to 30, all staff who have met those markers. It was just a lovely gathering, and I think some of you could not be there, sadly, but it was a really fantastic event. You were missed. And then actually the following day was our Wellness Wednesday. Both of those events are coordinated by our Erica Madrigal, who does a fantastic job of putting these things together and making sure that we have a great time. I was fortunate enough to be hosting the paella cooking class in our culinary wing, which is fantastic. I do want to add our culinary teacher, our new culinary teacher, has been working in that space, and it's been really nice to see how she immediately recognized, because we had such a long time with subs, how to get kids into cooking. So they've been cooking almost as often as they can, and that space has never looked better. The culinary space, the cleanliness of the room, and just really nice to see. So we're very pleased with our new cooking instructor, culinary instructor. I've been attending concerts and performances. I got to debut my acting role on the stage of the PAC as part of the band performance. I played the grumpy elf in that performance. And then myself, Mr. Heller, and Miss Miranda were able to attend the CAPS District Systems Leadership. This is around PLC work. We will have 2 other sessions. This is a collaborative with districts from across the state, which is really nice, especially for me as superintendent, to be in rooms with other superintendents who are doing and leading this work. That was fantastic. Next slide. So, as mentioned earlier in one of the presentations, tomorrow is, if the state complies with what they've stated, tomorrow is the public release of the California dashboard. I'm not going to go into any details right now. I will just preview that one of our best color-coded indicators is actually our English language progress indicator. So I've seen a preview. So that will be public tomorrow. So kudos to our EL support staff and instructors. They're showing great progress in that indicator. But we will be back with you all to do a thorough dive into this dashboard presentation. But just so people are aware, I listed the indicators that are below there, the academic indicator, which is based on our Smarter Ballot assessments. And now we have 2 years to compare. So now not only do we have status, we have change. And if you recall, the color-coded from red to blue, that's back this year with the dashboard. Okay. We haven't seen in the preview, they did not release, if you recall, the 5x5 grid. I don't know if how many of you remember those color-coded grids. Mm-hmm. I have not seen those yet. I'm not sure if those will also be released tomorrow, but just the traditional sort of scale of red to blue for each of these indicators, except for one. I believe it's the college and career is not a status and change, it's just status at this point. But every other indicator up there will show a color code.
Is it like the Trivial Pursuit?
Yes, yes. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so you'll see those, and of course, you'll see it for district-wide. You can go down to the school level, and then you can also look at specific student groups for those. So something to do over the break to start to dive in. Some of these actually happened already. We did a training with our administrators. Actually, it was a joint session, included administrators from Calistoga. Our insurance provider came in and did a condensed, would have been 3-hour presentation in 90 minutes. So there's definitely more work to do to bring them back. I was able to attend last night the Ag Advisory meeting. It was the first time I attended one of those sessions. They meet twice a year. And that's our industry support folks, our industry professionals who come and support our ag program. It was just really nice to hear and see everything that's happening within the ag division. I heard that 53% of our high schools are in ag, something like that. It's a considerable number of our students who take some version of an ag course or in FFA as well, which is fantastic to see, and it truly represents our demographics of our school. It's another factor that was really nice to see. It's not heavily skewed in one direction. So yeah, they're doing tremendous work. The 3 ag teachers were there presenting what they've done so far, where they're headed. It's just great stuff to see. Something to be very proud of that we offer our students. And then of course, coming up, winter break. No school for 3 weeks. No, there's school tomorrow. Oh, okay. The break starts after tomorrow. Sorry, that probably should not say December 15th. Oh, okay. No, that's what I was like. Oh, okay, no, tomorrow our schools are on a shortened day tomorrow, and then we wish everyone a great break. Sorry about that. Well, that didn't add to the confusion. You all work tomorrow.
I know,
We all
really.
work tomorrow. And that's my report.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, to our most patient St. Helena Teachers Association report to the board.
Oh, subcommittee? Do you want to?
Oh, sorry, I think I might have missed one, Mark.
Sorry,
I
sir.
did. I'm sorry.
This will be very brief.
Yes,
This
it
will
will
be very
be.
brief.
Okay.
Actually, can I add just one thing?
Yes.
And I wanted to jump back up to that third slide in regards to Wellness Wednesday. We started that a few years back, and we started with some very basic activities, and it's really expanded. And that, I think Erica has taken a huge leadership role in not only developing activities that staff want, but providing little touches like water and mats for yoga, and making sure that our presenters are treated well. And I believe, I'm going to embarrass her because I know she would do the same to me, but I believe the Wellness Wednesday is presented to North Bay Insurance as kind of a model program for how to do Wellness Wednesdays for other wellness activities in districts. So I just want to make sure that our board and our community knows that the effort that she puts in really validates the staff's wellness and an opportunity on that day.
Very well put, and I agree. And they were amazing opportunities. I was so disappointed that I could not participate in anything. So,
They were great.
so thank you for that extra shout out. That was well deserved. Okay, Superintendent Subcommittee presentation number C, please. Item C.
So this is brief. We had one committee during that time frame. That was the Business Operations Committee that met. And neither of those trustees are here to speak to that committee. So just you can see we always include the slide deck that is a QR code. We reviewed our facilities project list, which actually led into then our board study session that we had, and over the past few meetings we've been bringing that to the board. There was a presentation on the unaudited actuals to the committee as well. That was already board approved, but it was important that the business ops also see that report. And then we had a discussion specifically around preschool for all. If you recall, Trustee Pelosi, you wanted us to revisit the amount that we provide to preschool for all on an annual basis. And so there was a discussion around that, and there'll be a recommendation that will be made in this year's budget for next year
Okay.
in support of that program. And lastly, which is always great to do, providing and collecting feedback on the meeting itself and the meeting structure. Dr. Vang, anything else you want me to add about that? Perfect. Thank you. And lastly, I want to just do a plug because we are adding a new ad hoc committee. That'll be our field trip and sort of fundraise ad hoc committee, and we'll be looking to get people to participate in that, and that'll be a broad group, including representation from our parent groups that we want as part of that.
Perfect.
I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, now 9D, St. Helena Teachers Association report to the board. Thank you for staying with us and
Thank you.
being here tonight.
No problem, no problem. Good evening, trustees. I want to say I spoke to a lot of teachers after the wellness day, and there were a lot of sore legs, especially the people who did the strength training. I did yoga, so I was nice and relaxed. Also, I had a kind of a question on the DOC interdistrict transfer thing. I was curious. It'd be interesting to see how many parents or students we get from basic aid districts, because I think those districts would not be affected by if we get a Calistoga kid that they're not going to reject because there's no ADA money tied to that. So that would be a little side note. Anyway, so an update. This is going to seem a little bit like old news now that we've discussed these topics, but we'll go for it. An update since our last meeting. So our members approved, albeit with some concerns, the proposed calendar. I want to acknowledge the calendar committee for all the hard work. Having been on a calendar committee in the past, I know it's not an easy task to meet the needs or to meet the interests of all the stakeholders, and everybody has kind of competing interests. But I do believe that the committee did their best in weighing all the concerns of all the parties involved. It seems to me that this was probably one of the more comprehensive committees I've seen since in my tenure at in this district of 20 years. That said, I would say that every process presents opportunities for improvement in the next go around. So, and a lot of members have reached out to me on things they would like to see, some tweaks to the method and methodology or what we did. So I'll take that to the calendar committee the next time. Remember, it's 3 years, and so if we find something doesn't work in these 3 years, it's definitely not something permanent. So I try to counsel people, keep that in mind. We're not talking forever. Right. We're talking 3 years, and if we made an error, or if there was an error that was made, or something that we didn't realize, things can be fixed. So anyway, and then also a shout out to the members also said, the holiday / years of service ceremony was really nicely done at Farmstead, well appreciated, and so yeah, and a nice thank you to everyone who was involved in making that happen, and also just wanted to wish everyone a happy holidays and a wonderful winter break to everyone's families. So thank you. That's great.
And the same to you, and congratulations on your 20 years.
Thank you. Thank you.
What did you get?
I got a pen set.
Okay.
Yeah. So
to take notes to bring to the calendar committee.
So yeah, it's a strange thing. 20 years, it doesn't feel that long.
I know.
But some of the things seem like an eternity ago. Like I think about the things that I've seen at school and the changes, and it seems like a lifetime ago. And when I think of 20 years, it doesn't seem that long, but like time is a weird. As I get older, I find time as more of an odd thing than I ever thought about when I was young. So.
Well, it's because you ride your bike. That's why you have such a youthful exterior and mindset. So, but congratulations! Thank you for your commitment to St. Helena.
I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Thank you. I couldn't be at a better place. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item now E is the CSEA report to the board, which I don't have anything written and no one is present. So, and then trustees, as always, items F, G, H, and I are our principal reports, our written reports, and thank you as always for providing those for us. Okay, so now we go on to the consent agenda. Excuse me. The consent agenda contains routine items judged as appropriate to be acted upon in one motion. If a board member requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda agenda, the item will be considered under discussion and action items. Is there anyone present who wishes to comment on this agenda item? Any written comments or online? No? Okay. Trustees, any questions about these? Yes, go right ahead.
I just wanted to, I guess, pull 11D just for some discussion.
Okay.
Before approving everything.
Okay. Item 11D, approval of fundraisers, will be pulled from the consent agenda and discussed and voted upon separately. So with that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item D as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Madrigal will conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Mora?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, so item 11D is the approval of the fundraisers, and on that we have some fundraisers for some sports teams. So, Trustee Mora, why don't you go ahead and start the conversation?
Yep. So just start, I don't have a problem with anything that's on there. I guess what I wanted to try to understand, we have just had discussions about at the board meetings about fundraisers for choir, for band, and I want to just make sure the messaging that I've heard around fundraising for sports at high school is that the Saints Athletic Association is the one time for fundraising for the sports. And I think this might be the second time I've seen wrestling, track, and girls basketball. So it was last year and this year. I just wanted to make sure that we're being consistent as a district on fundraising for sports and knowing that we have the athletic association. And that was all. It's not a...
Understood.
That's all.
So you want to make sure that both community donors, coaches, everybody is clear on their avenues for asking for funds as well. Like, in other words, for something like this, if the district provides something that's essential, and if it's not deemed essential, perhaps they go and fundraise, and you want to make sure, or you want to understand if the protocol is, then does that request go to like someone like Saints Athletic Association?
Or is there an avenue that's missing to come ask for additional district funds to make the needs met? I
Sure.
don't know. I just want to make sure that the process is working, because it just feels like I don't understand why additional fundraising happens
When there's
outside of those
outside of the
funding sources.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. So somebody can help answer that. Yeah, we do have our athletic director in the audience as well. If you want to add to the conversation, Brandon, you're welcome to do so. Thank you for being here.
Sure. So some of what you asked about, Trustee Mora, is certainly a question that a lot of people don't realize about how the sports get all of their funds. So I think it is a question that is warranted. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that the district funds pieces of athletics. It has grown in terms of the essential part. In the last 3 years, we've added several pieces of what we deem essential to our athletic programs, and have gone to the district to say, yes, we'd like the district or the school to pay for this. But there are two other avenues that we use. We have our own ASB accounts, much like the ag accounts do, the choir account does. And we, as an individual coach, have the ability to fundraise funds, to use those funds for other needs that may not be essential to running the sport, but they're also funds that are needed to, I guess, what's the best word to use, to operate the sport on a level that continues to encourage kids to participate. And then there's the SAA. And the SAA is a board that I am not a voting member on. I would encourage all of you as board members to reach out to SAA to ask about what specifics that they typically fund. but I do know that the SAA works with the schools. I don't know if Dr. Vang or has had a chance to meet with them yet. Sometimes they do. I know Dr. Rilio has met with them on one occasion, and they learned about. You can learn about what they typically fund, but they do work with the schools. They fund generally needs that enhance the kids' experience and their ability to perform. I would say that's probably a general way to describe what they try to fund. But the programs have fundraised for years in their own accounts. To give you an example, when I took over softball, at that time, there were not any district funds allotted for uniforms. And to be honest with you, until 3 years ago, the district did not provide funds for uniforms. It was all based on what the programs were able to fundraise and get donations for. So within that program account, oftentimes our coaches go and get anonymous donations for different things that they need, like ticket items that may not necessarily be things that SAA would fund, because SAA is focused on improving the experience and the performance of the child or the student athlete. But it might be something that the district doesn't deem essential for. So there are several things. We did a donation type thing when I took over softball to do uniforms, so I could have enough money because the uniforms were so ancient. We've had I personally, as a football coach, had donations to cover new football helmets, and now those things are funded within the district. So we've changed a couple of items, but that's a little bit in its infancy still. Mr. Cinto and I are working on those items to try to kind of outline what the district and the school, I keep saying the district or the school, should really be focused on paying for, and then what coaches should go on and talk to the SAA for, or maybe they should ask me about what the best avenue for funds are. So those conversations are kind of in its infancy because of the new change in the athletic administration. But I can tell you, Mr. Cinto, being that this is a side issue, does a really good job of managing all of that. And I think it does kind of live with him. He does a really good job of talking with me, saying, hey, Brandon, you need to talk to this coach about, this fund being a better ask for the school, or maybe you need to go to SAA, or maybe this is an item that you can go and fundraise for, or maybe it's an item that you just need to kind of go and say, hey, I need this. If you want to make a donation, you certainly can. Anybody can make a donation to any of our programs for any type of information that we're looking for. And that's kind of the outline of what we do.
And as he's mentioned, that inventory of even just the cycle of refresh, right? We talk about refresh with Promethean boards, football helmets, and some safety equipment, right? That has to get refreshed every once.
Yeah, and we've done. I mean, speaking of football, I mean that's the other challenging thing for people to understand, is that our sports are such a wide range. I mean, the amount of money that it costs to run a football program is vastly different from running a cross-country program. So there are needs by individual programs that are much greater than needs of another specific program. So we try to manage that all within good taste and try to do the best we can to outreach to certain community members that have interest in those activities, just like the ag does, or the performing arts do, or anybody like that. So right now I feel like it works really well. And there's hiccups along the way, but those three ways of funding do seem to work pretty well.
Okay, I did not know about the third, but mainly why I wanted to pull it is I wanted to make sure, because if we are seen as a funding area,
Yeah.
if we can help support, I just wanted that to be brought up to us if you need it. I
Yeah,
guess.
every fundraiser form, sorry to interrupt you, I don't mean to interrupt. Every fundraiser form goes through Mr. Cinto as the site administrator. Every SAA request goes through me and Mr. Cinto as the site administrators at the school. And Mr. Cinto has often pulled items and said, no, let's go talk to Andy previous to Dr. Fang. And now we've also asked Dr. Fang several times about items that maybe the district could push into. And the biggest one in the last 3 years has been uniforms. So we're on the 3rd year of our rotational sport on our uniforms.
And I think I know it was like two concerns is like, we always want to be mindful of like double dipping in the community generosity, right? Because there's that kind of feeling. And then also, I think you answered it perfectly. I think the board just wanted to understand, it's just like how the parent group would work back those days. If there's multiple sets of eyes to say, oh, well, the foundation turned this down, so now let's ask parent group. And that goes through you now, and it goes to the principal. And I think that's what you wanted to make sure what was happening, that somebody just wasn't having to do a fundraiser for the sake of not going through the process.
Or is there something we can do to help?
Right. Okay. So
I encourage the coaches to come talk to me before their season starts and say, okay, what are items you have that are of interest to you? And I will go through line by line with them and say, this is good to ask the district or the school. This is good that comes out of your program. You got to start moving some funds out of your program, or this is something that you need to go and ask SAA for.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
That's helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Farrell, for being here.
And I just want to say that I'm encouraged by you saying that you do come to the district and if you do need help with things. And so we're thankful for that. We're happy that you're doing that. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that.
And overall, I would just say that on all athletic programs across the country run at a loss, a financial loss, but the student engagement piece is way more important than that loss. And someday, I guess, maybe we'll all coach Texas high school football and we'll all make money coaching football. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Okay, so with that, is there a motion to approve item 11D on the consent agenda?
I will make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Madrigal will conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Mora?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye, motion carried. Okay, item 12A is listing our future agenda items. We have our next regular board meeting January 11th. And to note that that is now the second Thursday of the month. We are switching from third. So everybody mark your calendars. We'll be here on the second Thursdays. And then we have a board study session. We've been invited by the staff that were engaged in building thinking classrooms on January 17th. So we'll be participating in that. And is there anything else, trustees, at this time?
I want to just note something. We decided that we were not going to do Adopt a School for January. We were going to
Correct.
skip that one and then reset.
Right, reset for February.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. That's great. Any other items, trustees?
Just, I think February is not the second Thursday, correct?
No, that one actually is going to
we
be the
moved that.
fourth. It's the
So-
fourth one. The meeting calendar is
Be
posted.
published, but I was
Yes.
just thinking, I think
Yeah.
we made an exception.
It is, that'll be on the website and
22nd.
yes, the 22nd. So that will be the fourth Thursday. So we'll put, the lights, it'll be all lit up and it'll be great. Okay, so is everybody comfortable with that moving forward? Okay. So item 13A is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Madrigal will conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Mora?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye, motion carried. Meeting ended at 8:40 p.m. Thank you, everybody, and happy holidays.